Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is not a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1. While originally planned as a second installment meant to be continued directly after the events of Dead Reckoning, the now officially titled The Final Reckoning is three things. 1. A standalone Mission Impossible film which will be enjoyable for any moviegoer. 2. Being a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1. And 3. Being a satisfying possible conclusion for fans of the 30-year Mission Impossible franchise. Does The Final Reckoning end Ethan Hunt's journey? Is this really not a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1? Still confused? That's okay. I've got most of the answers. Hit like, hit subscribe, and let's break down why Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning isn't a true sequel, may not be final, but definitely is impossible. The landscape of cinema is rapidly changing every day, and Tom Cruise and director Christopher McQuarrie are literally and figuratively fighting artificial intelligence both in the movie and in the real world. Because with the amount of content that comes out online every day, Tom Cruise, who also does double duty as executive producer on all the Mission films, feels it's his responsibility to get moviegoers into the seats. And how does Tom Cruise do that? Well, his focus is on the stunts in Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible is a vehicle for Tom Cruise to be a modern day Buster Keaton. And even a recent David Blaine exploit reminds me of things that Tom Cruise is doing. So while The Final Reckoning is a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1, the title change is crafted purposefully and with a lot of nuance. When you think about a title like The Final Reckoning, final can be associated with numbers, right? It's the last of. So The Final Reckoning could be a conclusion to Dead Reckoning Part 1. The Final Reckoning could also just be Ethan Hunt's Final Reckoning, and that is alluded to in some of the language used in the film. And just specifically using the word reckoning harkens back to the previous film, Dead Reckoning. And Dead Reckoning had to do with the submarine, whereas The Final Reckoning really has to do with Ethan Hunt, his journey, connecting all the way back to the first film and Jim Phelps. So can you watch Dead Reckoning having never seen a Mission Impossible film and just wanting to go to the movies and see something incredibly fun? Yes, you can watch Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning as a standalone Mission Impossible film, which would be enjoyable for any moviegoer. And that is one of the film's strengths. While, if you're a longtime fan of the franchise, it may initially rub you the wrong way. I saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning 2 times, and the first viewing mildly confused me because there was a lot of exposition at the beginning of the film. However, the second time I saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, I really enjoyed the beginning of the movie with the exposition because it sort of turns the car on, puts on the seat warmers, gets you prepared for what you're about to do, and really sets the stage for the rest of the film. And it's true, we have to remember that this is a Mission Impossible movie, and I think maybe the first time I sat down with a little pretension. But if you can watch this movie and just have fun, I swear you're gonna have the best time. So yes, if you have never seen a Mission Impossible movie, fear not, because the movie is a lot of fun for new fans of the franchise. Now, what if you're a longtime fan? Well, if you're a longtime fan, you probably already saw the movie a couple of times, and you probably love it because I do. The Final Reckoning is a fun addition to Ethan Hunt's journey across the globe, saving us again and again, one impossible mission at a time. Yeah, I had a fun time watching the movie, and I bet we are going to have a fun time watching the movie and talking about it again when it comes out on physical media. So, longtime fans of the franchise, I do believe if you didn't like it the first time, give it another shot. Now, how does it play as a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1? I have to say, this is where the film fails, because as a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1, it doesn't deliver. There is too much exposition. There is too much assumption that you might not be caught up with the franchise. I think Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning succeeds as a standalone film, succeeds as a series cap. It works as a Mission Impossible 8, but it doesn't work as a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's all the same characters, the same plot, it's dealing with the same thing, and it's a continuation of Ethan's journey, because at the end of Dead Reckoning Part 1, he has the key, and at the beginning of The Final Reckoning, he has the key, and it's about him finding the sub and etc. But it just doesn't complete, in my opinion, that robust story that Dead Reckoning Part 1 was telling. This film is a different movie. This is about Ethan Hunt's journey concluding in some way. And so herein lies the question. Does Ethan Hunt's journey end? Is this the final reckoning? In a lot of ways, yes. This is the end of the Ethan Hunt story that began 30 years ago in the original Mission Impossible movie that was a reboot. In fact, the villain in that film, Jim Phelps, played by Jon Voight, his character, Jim Phelps, was the hero in the television show. But is it satisfying? Does this satisfyingly conclude the story that Ethan Hunt began all those years ago? Well, yes and no. At the end of the film, it's a bit reminiscent of The Dark Knight Rises, in which we find out Batman is living his life anonymously, drinking whiskey and dating a retired Catwoman. Ethan Hunt walks alone at the end of the film, but somehow simultaneously with his friends. It's a bit ambiguous of an ending, and one I'm fine with, because if in 10 years Tom Cruise wants to make another Mission Impossible film, I know that I will be there. Because these movies are good fun. They never took themselves as seriously as the James Bond franchise. They were never as quirky as even the best Indiana Jones films get, which sometimes I feel like Mission Impossible is a mix between James Bond and Indiana Jones put together. So yes, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning ends the Mission Impossible franchise. For now, completes the Ethan Hunt story that began 30 years ago, but no, is not a sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1. If you want to hear all my thoughts on Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, check out this review. Already know what you think about Mission Impossible? How about my controversial review on Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis? Did you like Joker 2? Me neither. I saw Joker 2 on the biggest screen possible, and not even IMAX 1570 could save Joker. Check out these reviews or any of my others. This was Film School Dad.